if we do get a deal, what is your expectation as to the type of deal that we are going to get? On a spectrum of hard Brexit to soft Brexit, what do you think this looks like?
I think it looks somewhat closer to hard Brexit, but the good news is that it would likely have a transition period, which is exactly what I think the whole world needs to see. Because there's no question that what's been happening across not just Brexit, but the broader trade world is the effect of chaos, and chaos really creating a very strong downward pull on the global economy and economic growth. So what I think is really critical to look for is what does it do for the ability to everybody to have a bit of a transition period to figure out these complicated customs arrangements and other things that need to be done.
Chris, as we've just heard, a deal that provides some degree of structure and understanding for investors to work with. What is the implications of that for the British economy? People have long talked about the opportunity cost over the last 3 years that the British economy has faced because people are not willing to make the investments. A deal now? Talk me through the implications economically.
I think it's great. I mean, I think what British economy needs most of all is certainty. And whether it's no hard Brexit, soft Brexit, as long as there's a deal, there's certainty. And even if it was no deal and there was some certainty. So I think my sense is there's a lot of money that wants to come into the UK, and it's quite interesting the way sterling's reacting, the way the FTSE 250 is reacting. It's sort of telling you that the assets in the UK are very cheap. And I think that money coming in, the certainty coming back, business confidence with that is actually very good for the UK economy in aggregate.
Jennifer, whatever this deal involves, we have Scotland's Sturgeon talking about another independence vote next year. So it sounds like it would please more the British and, say, the DUP, who need to be pleased in order for this to pass, than the Euro aspect, which would suggest that maybe the border would stay where it is and that there would be some kind of backstop. Where would that leave something like the Good Friday Agreement?
Well, again, this has obviously been one of the things that everybody has been struggling to figure out. And people like me and others that live in the trade space are constantly asked, can you do this kind of arrangement where you sort of have Northern Ireland in a customs union with the European Union, and you sort of have Northern Ireland in a customs union with the rest of the United Kingdom? And can you do this? And how would all of these border controls actually work? And as a practical matter, can you do what Boris Johnson has been proposing? And the honest answer from many of us is we can't tell yet until we can really see it written down and try to understand how would these kind of border checks work. I mean, we in the United States have spent a lot of time looking at how do we organize, for example, the border between the United States and Canada, where you have many of the same aspects of the Northern Ireland border with many, many multiple crossings over a long stretch of miles, with the needing to do checking but not letting the checking get in the way of a very sort of cordial and very integrated economies between the United States and Canada, for example. We don't know whether any of those kind of procedures can be done between Northern Ireland and Ireland, and I think that is going to be the real test, both for the European Union and for whether or not this can get through the UK, because obviously it's very problematic for the DUP and others if the perception is that what's actually being created is a hard border across the Irish Sea. And whether that is happening is going to depend on whether the rest of it can be made to work. So we're all going to be looking for this text to come out.
Right, exactly. And if it's not specific on any of these questions, if it talks about a backstop and maybe pushing the can down the road to bring back that old chestnut, then is there an impact on economies worldwide, on economies locally, Britain, Ireland, Europe?
I think some of that is also going to depend on what is then the future relationship between the UK and the EU, and those negotiations haven't even begun yet. So it's going to depend on how far and how closely integrated do the EU regulatory policies remain with the UK, how much can you continue to engage in global supply chains that are moving product across not just the Northern Ireland border, but how much is it going to be easy for companies that are building product in the UK to be able to ship it and move it without regulatory barriers, without significant tariffs into the rest of Europe. If all of that comes about, either as a result of this deal or as a result of the future negotiation, then I think you will not see as much tension over these border issues because you're going to continue to see, again, consistent trade and movement of goods, services, people, capital across those borders without substantial barriers. If that's where we end up, then I think that would be, again, and a good outcome all across the board. But whether that can be achieved in the face of Brexit, I think is a very real question for the British voters to be asking.